This video contains spoilers for Season 2, Episode 7 of Fionna and Cake. You have been warned. I had always wondered about what role LSP will play in Season 2, as we see a very weird sequence of him in the trailer, and we finally figure out what that is. Because this episode begins with LSP sleeping, then being absorbed by a pink light, which then he gets abducted by, although it's also his dream sequence. This whole thing is very similar to what Tree Trunks goes through in the episode High Strangeness, when those aliens appear in her dreams. In fact, if you listen to the song and compare the two,
they're taking me again.
Hi, everyone.
they are pretty similar. Now, this is that very dream sequence that we see in the trailer with LSP, and we will find out soon who this new mysterious character is. Although before we can get any further into that, we cut to the name and title of this episode, The Wolves Who Wandered. But I'm pretty sure the title of this episode stands for Fionna and Fionna, who spend most of this entire episode wandering throughout the city in a dreamlike state. Now, before I do a tiny little deep dive, the shirt that Gary is wearing is Timmy. But as for that deep dive, let me give you a little reminder. As we know, the sweet spot was Gary's dream, and it almost came true when they were about to open said dream/bakery before it was revealed that the plot of land was owned by Queenie, who then priced them out of it, forcing them to leave and making them pay $70K just to get it back. And ever since then, Fiona's made it her absolute life goal to help them get it back. Now that I've caught you up on that aspect, let's talk about Fionna for a sec. Ever since the ending of Season 1, where she literally saved their entire universe by making it a real canon thing, separate from Simon's influence, she has gotten nothing but praise around the entire town, as she should. But she herself isn't feeling that way. In fact, she feels that all of the people around her are outgrowing her, out-succeeding her, that are just gonna leave her behind in the dust and totally forget about her. Obviously, based on events that have just happened, she shouldn't feel this way, but she does. She feels like a failure. So going back to the whole saving the sweet spot thing, she is not giving this up. She is determined to succeed. And with that leads perfectly into what she is doing in this episode. She is putting everyone else's feelings aside but her own. I don't think she's doing this intentionally, but she's so caught up in succeeding and helping get the sweet spot back that she's lost the plot. After all, this is Gary's place. And after hearing that DJ Flame is now going to perform at the fundraiser, which cuts Marshall Lee's time in half, he's not very thrilled about this. And neither is Marshall. I mean, why would they? But Fionna doesn't really seem to clock this. She's just so locked in on this one goal of getting the sweet spot back that she can't even see the feelings of her friends. Now don't you worry, we'll see a lot more Fionna later in this episode. But then we cut to Huntress Wizard, who is doing her iconic locked in pose that we saw during her whole backstory arc, and she's reminiscing on what the spirit warrior had said to her about how a broken tool will return to the flame. Now, after the events of last episode and that shared dream that Fionna experienced with Hunter and DJ Flame, you can kind of see who the broken tool is based on the fact that she is so infatuated with the flame, and the flame being DJ Flame, obviously. Now, why is Fionna a broken tool? Well, I kind of already explained it. Fionna is trying to be helpful, but like I just mentioned, she's lost the plot. The very reason that she started trying to save the sweet spot, because Gary's feelings were hurt, it was his place. Now she doesn't even care about Gary's feelings. It's all about her now. It seems in this metaphor, Fionna is the broken tool, and returning to the flame, I think pretty obviously stands for her admiration for DJ Flame, or Felix. And speaking of DJ Flame, he is supposed to appear at the site of the fundraiser for a little run through practice test, and he never shows, which sets into motion the rest of this episode, as there's a reason why he isn't there, and Fionna believes that it's Fennel's fault. So she goes to DJ Flame's apartment with no luck and only ends up finding Fennel there. But some of the things in his apartment are cool little nods to Flame Princess in the original Adventure Time series, and the first one being the Fire Wolf Pup figurine on the top of his dresser. And the second being what looks like a giant portrait of what the Fire Kingdom looks like hanging over his bed. I'm sure that there's a scientific name for what this actually is, but I don't know what it's called. So if you do, please let me know in the comments. And the third, which is the cat that DJ Flame and Fennel own together, I believe represent Flame Princess's immediate family, being her two younger brothers and one older brother. I believe these are actually DJ Flame's cats, as three cats who got a very obvious cameo in this episode. It seemed pretty deliberate, and sure enough, that number matches up with the exact amount of siblings Flame Princess has, not counting cousins or aunts and uncles. Now back to actually what's going on. They enlist the help of Huntress Wizard in order to find out where DJ Flame is, and it's once again revealed that Huntress Wizard is starting to look like a pretty overpowered character. As we know, the Heart of the Forest got what looked to be killed as we see the other Green Wizard members' powers drained from them, but it seems like Huntress Wizard doesn't need a lot of those powers to be able to do pretty much anything she wants. Even though without the Heart of the Forest's power, she is able to give Fionna and Fennel Wizard Eyes. The same Wizard Eyes that we see Ice King use first in the episode Mortal Recoil, and then more in depth in the episode Beyond This Earthly Realm. To me, this is where things get a bit tricky and a bit confusing. As we know from episode 2, The Crocodile Who Bit a Log, when we are seeing Huntress Wizard's backstory, it was a very deliberate line
Green wizards only.
to be a reference to wizards only fools, which to me means that wizards and green wizards are two very different things. But it seems like Huntress Wizard has both of them. Obviously, we know now she does not have the green wizard powers because she basically killed the Heart of the Forest and her powers got drained, but it seems like she does still have wizard powers, even though she's not an ooh. Now, I guess this does kind of make sense based off of what the Spirit of the Forest says in the episode Flute Spell from the original series, after he says to Huntress Wizard,
I've been right here. But the forces that drew us close became obscured as you drifted into the lifestyles of Magic City living.
that the forces that drew them close in the first place, that being their time spent together training Huntress Wizard that we got in her backstory, became more obscure as she spent more time in Wizard City. So even in the original Adventure Time series, it was very clear that she started to drift away from green wizards and spent a lot of her time to practice normal wizardry in Wizard City, which is one big way of explaining why she would have wizard powers to begin with. And after growing these leaves out of her hand that both Fionna and Fennel eat, they both gain wizard eyes. Both of them can now see all of the creatures that are living in the spirit world dimension, which exist in tandem with the real world, but can only be seen through a higher power or higher plane. This leads Fionna and Fennel on a manhunt, which ends with them meeting up with LSP, who is coming back again to show that he's actually a pretty important character in this new season, because he's got this aura glow around him that, remember, can only be seen in the spirit world dimension. And although LSP has had a very few amount of cameos in Fionna and Cake, I will say every time LSP has had a cameo, it's been a fantastic experience. I love how they portrayed LSP's character in Fionna and Cake, and of course, Pendleton Ward coming back to voice is just amazing. Now, they find LSP in a hairdresser, and who is one of the hairdressers? Well, it's none other than the Tree Witch, a character from, at least to my knowledge, we only see one time during the entire series, and that of course is in the episode To Cut a Woman's Hair. We also see that these wizard eyes that both Fionna and Fennel now possess allow them to see the magical counterparts of every human gender-bent character in Fionna's world. The first one obviously being LSP, and the second one being them seeing Lord Monochromicorn flying above Emkron's head, which again makes a lot of sense. Fionna's world was magical. We saw in previous episodes the very moment that it turned from magical to non-magical, so with them now possessing magical wizard eyes, it would make a lot of sense that they would be able to see their magical counterparts because they are technically one and the same. But going back to LSP and his dream that we saw at the very beginning of this episode, he reveals to Fionna and Fennel that these aliens from his dream are the ones most likely responsible for causing DJ Flame's disappearance. Based on some of his drawings, we see what's about to come next, but he also explicitly calls them aliens, along with one of his pictures being what looks like depicts an actual alien. Again, another similarity as to what happened with Tree Trunks in the episode High Strangeness. Speaking of callbacks to the original Adventure Time series, after they leave the salon, both Fionna and Fennel run inside of a burning building, and they get rescued by some firefighters, who are the human gender-bent counterparts to the water nymphs. Now, these creatures that Fionna and Fennel can now both see because of the wizard eyes are very adamant that Fionna and Fennel both go inside of this burning building, which is a little weird because we see that's not where the transporter is that takes them to where they're actually supposed to go is located. So are they just malevolent creatures? It kind of looks like it. Speaking of the transporter, it's actually technically not located on Earth because it only appears after both Fionna and Fennel focus all of their intentions on DJ Flame. Not only does it look like it, but this also confirms that this is supposed to represent the Martian transporter that we see in Magic Man's basement back in Ooh. Because if you remember, the Martian transporter only works and is powered by the user's thought of a loved individual. And that's exactly how they summon it in Fionna and Cake. It's also the same device that we saw in LSP's dream at the very beginning of this episode, but does it lead them to Mars? It actually doesn't. It transports them to Venus. Now, let's talk about Venus because it's very interesting. But just before that, real quick, Marshall Lee finally confronts that stalker guy who has been working with Marshall Lee's mother, and we learn that indeed he was hired by her to keep Marshall Lee safe. We also learn that he is the reason that Marshall Lee didn't see any more of Simone, and we also learn that Marshall Lee viewed Simone as a motherly figure, as he pretty much confesses that he loved her, as in a motherly figure type of way that he genuinely looked up to, because we know he doesn't feel the same way about his mother. Okay, now let's talk about Venus. We see after taking the transporter that this is the exact mode of transportation that the original transporter to Mars from Ooo works with this pink beam. We also see that from the outside, the civilization that is living on Venus operates in a very similar way to how the civilization operates on Mars, with it being protected by this dome. Now, I want to give myself a tiny little pat on the back because this is the exact same shot that we saw in the trailer, and I thought that it was Mars because of the purple background along with what looked like a dome-like thing surrounding it. And although I was technically wrong, this is Fiona's world's counterpart to Mars, Venus. Now, why exactly is that? Well, it's actually a bit more nuanced than it just having to be different from Ooo. As we do know, in Ooo, on Mars, there is the King of Mars, which we first get introduced to as Abraham Lincoln. And now in Fionna and Cake, as they travel to Venus, this statue is credited as the Queen of Venus. But why are they different? Again, as we know, Fionna and Cake is the human gender bent version of characters, but how do you gender bendify a planet? Well, there's the god of Mars, and his Greek counterpart is Ares, and Ares is the Greek god of war. Now, without getting too philosophical, war itself can be stripped down to two people who really hate each other, so much so that they go to war, but the main premise being hate. And what is the opposite of hate? Love. Now let's work backwards. Who is the Greek god of love? Aphrodite. Aphrodite, of course, is already its Greek counterpart. So what is Aphrodite's Roman counterpart? It's none other than Venus. So us seeing them travel to the planet Venus in Fionna and Cake is actually perfect, and I'm sure all planned out by the writers. But technically speaking, by using what I just explained, Venus is the gender bent counterpart of Mars. So us seeing Venus here is not random at all and perfectly makes sense. Shout out to the writers. But what this all is leading to is that they captured the human's greatest source of love. And who is it? None other than Felix, DJ Flame. Of course, Fionna and Fennel object to this, and in sort of an ironic twist, in order to get him back, they have to defeat Venus's greatest lover, not warrior, which leads us into some new Fionna and Fennel lore. Now, during their love battle, Fionna and Fennel both learn that everything on this planet is powered by love. And then we get a surprising confession from Fennel. If you didn't know by now, Fennel is the human gender bent version of Fern, and if you remember who Fern was, he was technically Finn. He was born from the Finn sword, who had its own Finn living inside of it, but corrupted by the grass demon. Now, Fennel's confession is surprising because she confesses that she looks up to Fionna, that she's always wanted to be Fionna. And we know Fern, this was also the case for him, except Fern didn't really look up to Finn, he just wanted to be Finn. From the day he was born, he was told he was not Finn, but that he was Finn. Of course, we know Fern's story. He took the cynical route and literally tried to kill Finn to become Finn, but with Fiona's world being the human gender bent counterpart to this, I'm taking the counterpart a little literal, but instead of wanting to become Fionna based on hate, like how Fern wanted to become Finn based on hate, Fennel wants to be more like Fionna because of love and admiration. Again, it being the direct counterpart to hate. And because of this newfound bond between Fionna and Fennel being so strong, they end up saving DJ Flame from the Queen of Venus. And as they are all traveling back to Earth, Fionna sees Fennel with a little help through the wizard eyes to help see what she would look like back in the magical world of Fiona's universe. And instead of disliking or resenting or harboring any hatred whatsoever, she loves her. And of course, this is the direct counterpart to what happened with Finn and Fern. I don't think Finn ever hated Fern, but I'm sure Fern trying to kill Finn definitely didn't help. And although I do think Finn and Fern got a pretty good resolution in the finale, Fionna seeing Fennel as she would have looked like in the magical world, and instead of hating her, loving her, of course, is the direct counterpart to this, which is really cool. Finn didn't like the idea of Fern trying to be exactly like him, but after Fionna hears that Fennel is only dressing the way she dresses is because of her admiration for Fionna, Fionna loves this. Some very deep cut stuff, and I absolutely love it. And again, shout out to the writers. Now let's check up on Huntress Wizard and Hunter and see what they're up to. We see that they found the corner of Moore and Orange Street and stumble upon a bunch of rose bushes being ripped up from the ground. Now this reaffirms that these rose bushes are not only popping up in the park, as Hunter has stated at the very beginning of season 2, but they're popping up all throughout the city, which is gonna lead me into my biggest theory and what I think this season will all lead up to. But who is doing this? None other than the lemon carbs and the human gender bent versions of the lemon candy citizens. But what do these rose bushes mean? Well, as we know, Huntress Wizard is desperately searching for the heart of the forest, and to me, these rose bushes bear a slight resemblance to the heart of the forest from Ooh, and that's exactly why I think Fiona's universe itself is going to turn out to be the heart of the forest. This would explain why these rose bushes are popping up literally everywhere, is because the universe itself is this, but it would also kind of explain that new root system that we got introduced to that Prismal has no jurisdiction over. If the heart of the forest was a universe in and of itself, or at the very least, the higher power in control over it, then seeing it as an entire universe itself would kind of make sense. Or at least in my mind, I'm putting that together. I don't know if I use my words correctly to explain that to you, but I hope you can kind of see to what I'm getting at. Anyways, Huntress Wizard and Hunter actually find DJ Flame here. In this universe, the lemon carbs are very rich, and they are hosting their own private party and hired DJ Flame to perform. But that begs the question, was any of the Venus stuff real? I think yes and no. I don't really know how 4D works, but from what I understand a little bit, because we live in 3D, we can observe something doing something, but if we were in 4D, that something could be doing something entirely different. What I'm getting at is, depending on the realm on which you reside in, you will observe encounters totally differently. Because the wizard eyes allowed Fionna and Fennel to see into the spirit world, and because of the events that we saw in the original Adventure Time series back in Ooh, these spirit world creatures are in fact a real thing, just unable to be viewed from a specific realm, that their entire adventure to Venus also must be real, just totally not comprehensible from everybody. And we see that's the case because back on Earth, the people who were observing Fionna and Fennel, to them, it just looked like they were on some delusional trip crying on this Ferris wheel. But to them, we know that that's not the case. However, one little wrench in this theory is the supposed DJ Flame that they rescued from the planet of Venus. Because it turns out they didn't rescue DJ Flame at all. They rescued a plushie that sort of resembles DJ Flame. I mean, not really. But again, that could also just totally prove that none of it was real at all. But I'm gonna be a little blissfully ignorant and think that it did happen. We can see that Fionna and Fennel's wizard eyes are starting to wear off, and they come out of this whole thing growing a little closer to each other, which should be a little alarming to you if you like Fennel, because we know in the original Adventure Time series, as soon as Finn and Fern grew closer to each other, aka after the events in the finale, we know Fern's fate. So does that mean that Fennel will have a similar fate in the next episode? I'm a big Fennel supporter myself, so I really hope that's not the case, but all signs are kind of pointing to that outcome. It also seems that Huntress Wizard has finally grown a little soft spot for Fionna and Cake as she agrees to help them save the sweet spot, which I kind of totally forgot about as we've gone on this crazy adventure. But if you remember, that Fiona's whole thing here throughout this entire season 2, she's determined to help her friends, and in this case, Gary, get the sweet spot back. And if you remember back to what I said towards the beginning of this video, she's kind of too obsessed with getting the sweet spot back, as she's now totally ignoring her friend's feelings and lost the whole point of getting the sweet spot back to begin with, because again, she totally ignores Marshall Lee's and Gary's feeling. After Marshall Lee learned that his mother hired some guy to technically remove the only person in his life that he viewed as a motherly figure, he's pretty upset. I think I would be too. And because Marshall Lee and Gary are in a relationship, Gary shares the same feelings. So because of this, Marshall Lee doesn't really want to perform at this fundraiser. And of course, Gary is perfectly okay with this, meaning that this entire fundraiser to save the sweet spot doesn't really matter anymore, because to Gary, Marshall Lee is more important. But Fionna is so wrapped around this idea of maybe this will finally give her the feeling of being a hero, getting the sweet spot back, because saving the universe didn't, so this will for sure. And that she's obsessed over it, because the entire reason why she wanted to get the sweet spot back in the first place was because Gary was hurt by it. Gary is no longer hurt by it because the priorities have changed. Fionna can't see this though. She is too focused on her own internal problems that she's not confronting. I've said this a lot and it's like a broken record, but Fionna has lost the plot. Now this is where things are going to get really interesting for Fionna and Cake season 2, because after this episode, we have seen every clip from the trailer. The first 7 episodes were also the only episodes that were given to certain people to view early, meaning when episodes 8, 9, and 10 drop, they will be brand new to absolutely everybody. As for Easter eggs in the ending credits scene, this plant that Fionna is watering represents the growth of Huntress Wizard, as it started out as one little leaf and it started to grow as Huntress Wizard grew in Fiona's apartment. We can now see what plant it is, and it looks like it's going to be a rose, which is interesting based off of what we know is happening in Fiona's world, and that rose bushes are popping up everywhere. Seems like it's too good to be a coincidence, but I guess we'll find out. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss it, and you don't miss the deep dives and analyses of the future episodes, because I'm sure they'll be juicy. If you like this video as well, don't forget to leave a like. Thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it from the very bottom of my heart. But as always, stay adventurous.